Hi, I'm Tamara Wheeler, and I currently serve as a volunteer on the GoCore board as the chairperson, and wanted to just invite you and welcome you here today to join us in a conversation about giving. I have Joel Malakoff, who's a certified financial planner, and we are having a conversation about living a more generous life and the definition of generosity in terms of time, talents, and treasures. So we're excited to welcome Joel today.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here. Absolutely.
Great. Well, we're so thankful for the 2020 year that has passed and just people's enormous generosity that we've seen among all of the people who are supporting work in their neighborhoods, abroad, across the world. So yeah, it is an important moment, and we wanted to just make sure that we are continuing in dialogue so that we can continue to live a more generous life together in all the ways that happens in time, talent, and treasure, as I mentioned. So yeah, we're just going to do a Q&A here, and you feel free to listen along. And if you have some questions, feel free to email those to us after, and we'll make sure to get to those since we have more planned, more sessions on generosity. So first, Joel, maybe you could just speak a little bit to how you started on this journey and how someone can think about living generously in some new ways.
I think for me, just as a person and just thinking about what it is to model or live a life of generosity, it takes some level of intentionality. And it's something that I think anyone who engages the heart of God ultimately is going to have to arrive at as a conclusion, is that really all that we have is not ours, and it doesn't exist really just for our own pleasure. Really, it is given with the specific purpose. And and the huge reason we're here on earth is to discover what that looks like. And particularly in the area of money and time and talent and treasures, we're really wanting to be intentional then. God, what do you intend? Because ultimately we're stewards. And so my goal and just my passion is, how do I become the best possible steward of what God has given me in all those areas? And so what are the levers I have at my disposal? In my case, it's to be a financial planner. So I get to help people make financial decisions. And, if you look at what I understand to be the purpose of what I do, it's, many people envision a financial planner as helping people reach a comfortable retirement or achieve various goals like that. And to me, those are really table stakes in the conversation. Of course, we need to be excellent at doing those things. You can get those at varying levels of quality at different organizations. But for us, the passion is really, how do we take that and then convert that into something that makes a difference for the kingdom of God? And really, in that sense, viewing ourselves as stewards of that wealth. So there's just a number of different things that are involved in that, but it's a very fun conversation. And I think, as I think about it, that's what God has placed in my heart. There's kind of that general call for every believer, which is to be a steward. And my specific calling is, how can I be a partner with what God wants to do to help bring that forth in people's lives? So anyway, it's so fun to be here just because I have an opportunity to talk about something about which I'm hugely passionate.
That's so great. It makes me think about even with the creation story and the Garden of Eden, and how, God made something for us to steward and care for, and that there is this fun adventure about discovering what is there and who and what needs help and growth. So I think if we parallel that to our own lives and some of the conversation that we get to have, and me and my day job being in marketing and not having to market cars or toothpaste, but getting to market meals for families who need a little more extra help, or someone's journey through recovery and addiction, and just how people get to help their neighbor and love their neighbor in different ways. And that starts, in our own hearts and minds. So I appreciate you framing it up like that. Speaking of in our own kind of homes, how have you engaged your family in this conversation about living generously and just how to think about, the collective resources?
Yeah. So for me, that's really the primary context where I feel like if I'm going to live out exactly what I'm telling people or encouraging them to do, it has to start with me. I didn't enter into my profession to become wealthy or to make a lot of money or even just to make people wealthy or something. I wanted to enter into it purposefully. I had intended to actually serve overseas doing international community development, which is communities in poverty, working with the economic strategies alongside people who would be doing more traditional medical related missions and also church planting and things. This is kind of like the economic arm of a community. That's what I studied for. So when I think about it, I'm like, what does it look like? You know, God, you kind of closed some doors at key points when I thought I might be going overseas. So it's my business, then it's my home. You know, thinking about my home, I have two boys. Their names are Judah and Jameson. They are 6.5 and 4.5. And what we did is we started a donor advised fund. I love a donor advised fund because what you can do is you can gift appreciated securities, and there are a number of tax advantages involved. Where basically it's a completed gift for the purpose of the IRS. So you get your tax deduction in the current year, and then you can distribute it as you decide to. But one such example would be we have a friend in Peru, and I went to school with her, to seminary with her, and her daughter was sick and was being intubated with pneumonia, and she needed to have an airlift from the Amazon jungle region where she was over to Lima to a research hospital there that could provide a certain quality of care. Well, I shared it with my boys, and I shared that there was a need, kind of with the idea, and I've told them, you are our advisory board now. So I should say that they are the advisory board for that donor advised fund. So I run by them major charitable decisions that we might make as a family. But I said, hey, you know, this little girl is sick. Would you like to help her out? And if you're willing to, then we'll go ahead and we'll match you from the family foundation or the family fund. And it was the first time my sons had ever broken open their piggy banks, as it were. My younger son, Jameson, has a Sharky bank that he broke open. For the first time, or actually he uncorked it. And my older son, Judah, has a fire truck, and he uncorked it. And I have this great picture of the two boys shaking out the change and the money they had in order to be able to give to that. And literally, and I stuck to this. I took what they did, what they put out there, and I matched it 1,000x. And we're in a position to do that. And it was a huge blessing. So what they have now is they have a friend in the jungles of Peru that they can't wait to visit, because we've since then messaged and FaceTime. It's an amazing story because she ultimately got the airlift to to Lima. And so there wasn't a concern about the finances of this. She also was restored in her health, and she's a happy, healthy, lovely little girl as a result. And so these are the things for which we give thanks. But it came through allowing my sons to participate in that generosity. And even just, actually yesterday, I asked my sons, I came into contact with a nonprofit in the Wyoming Valley of Pennsylvania through some clients. And we're going to probably do some partnership there. But I just ran it by them. I said, there are boys and girls who do not have shoes and do not have jackets to go to school. And it's snowing. And we have a place up in Tahoe. So they're familiar with snow, even though I'm in the Bay Area and we don't get any snow here. But it's like, can you imagine like going up to the slopes or up to the mountains and having no jacket? That'd be so terrible, you know, and they can relate to that and kind of grab hold. Oh, wow. We get to be a part of giving jackets and giving boots or shoes to kids who don't have these things. So, I mean, I'm trying to instill that. I think also, and this is just a small anecdotal thing, depending on where you live, I find that people in my area tend to live in a bubble. And there is a sense for a lot of young kids about entitlement. And I think that's one of the things we deal with in terms of raising our children. We raise children with more access and more abundance than we've known in our childhood. And it's difficult. We're trying to teach them how to navigate life. And it's difficult where my parents said no because they really didn't have the money. I have to say no because it's not in line with our values and it's not who we are. And trying to make decisions that way. So what I'm trying to do is form the value around generosity with them by including them on these decisions to help create that bigger picture and bigger vision. Finally, and I would just say this, I didn't do this in a vacuum. my parents are amazing models. So it was a year ago, this last Christmas, they basically said, they sat everyone down. They were at the table, there would have been 11 people. And they basically said, hey, what we want to do is we want to say, have everyone choose a charity that is the charity that is closest to your heart. And we're, as a Christmas gift, going to give a certain amount of money to every single charity that's identified. So Merry Christmas. What we're going to do is we're going to give in that way. And those are just ways and family moments where you can, I think, help people to think more. In my son's cases, it's not about the Lego they're receiving and the latest set. It really is also, oh, wow, I'm able to give, whether it's to the girl in Peru, the kids in the Wyoming Valley, or it's maybe that it's Nana and Papa as they know them. Nana and Papa are giving us a choice of who we want to give some money to be helpful. It's just a part of what we do as a family. It just becomes kind of second nature. I think if we're honest with ourselves, so much of life is stuff that we metabolize from our culture. And it's so much of it is subtle in terms of its influence, in terms of our expectations. What I think we're trying to do is subtly create a culture or an influence. You know, they're going to be around all the other stuff all the time, but hopefully we can create some sort of traction in their hearts and in their lives and create space for God to be at work. Anyway, that's a couple of those little strategies that we're using. And it's just so fun because they love it. And like I said, they've made friends around the world that they haven't met in person, but they can't wait to go meet in person. When do we get to go see her, Daddy? Okay, you know, Judy, you'll probably be 9 at least, Jameson 7. So you got a couple more years, but I will take you to Peru and you will get to meet her and you'll get to hang out and spend time.
I love the ways that your beautiful stories just speak to relationship. So not just of, sons and, brothers and sisters and sons and daughters and moms and dads, but really, and grandparents, but each individual, having a relational connection to someone else. And that is such a beautiful story of the one another's of life, and that how we get to bless and be in community with one another, even if we haven't met them yet. So thanks for sharing those stories. I remembered that my mom actually have a birthday coming up and I'm choosing a charity. So I remember I have to do my homework and figure out who should get some funds. I think that's the beauty of pandemic life and just realizing how much abundance there is and, how much we all have, even if there's difficulty, even if there's, unfortunate job loss and health considerations, but that we have each other and we have hope in a living God who wants to be part of our adventure. And so thank you again. I think those are great examples of ways that we can think about engaging our family units in a new and different way, possibly, and just with some creative adventuring when it comes to generosity. How would you say, what advice would you give people? I think everyone's in their mind, kind of, we're in this new year and 2020 is over and 2021 has come. For all of us who are thinking about, man, what do I want to accomplish this year? Or how should I enter, opportunity? And what are my hopes and dreams and wishes or intentions or keywords or scripture verse? Like what advice would you give to people about generosity and kind of living more generously or thinking about their time, their talent, and their treasures in particular ways?
The thing about any time we start a new year or a new season is there's a desire to set out resolutions and things that we might aspire to in that year. I think the start of a new year like we have right now, it's a great time. If you're making resolutions in other areas, why not make some resolutions concerning how generous you want to be? This is to me a great thing. They talk about the power of declaration. If you were to sit down with people and say, I have an intent of being generous in this way, you're that much more likely to fulfill that in a year. All the studies show that, the power of declaration. So not just internalizing it. And I'm not saying you want to go ahead and tell the world, But I think within my own family, for example, declaring it, Jackie is my wife. Jackie, this is what I'm feeling like God would have for us this year in the area of generosity. And truthfully, that's what we do. I'm at a stage because I own my own business, how we tithe and stuff like that is a little bit more murky. It's just not as clear cut. And so basically what I do is I just ask the Lord what he wants us to give at the beginning of the year. And what I try to do is just say, God, if this is what you're calling us to, I'm going to align my finances around this so that I can fulfill that. Instead of just saying, what did I make this year? I'm going to trust that you're going to provide these things. You've been so faithful thus far. So I have a number in mind, basically, of what I understand God wants us to do this year. And, a lot of it will happen perhaps to the donor advised fund. That's actually how we're funneling most of it. And part of it is it actually simplifies it because I get less tax receipts from different organizations. So it's actually simplified my tax life, okay, which is nice, as well as saving me taxes and all those things. But I just think there's that power of declaration and just starting out and saying, this is who I'm going to be. I'm going to be a generous person, or this year is going to be a year of generosity, especially if, for example, in the case of a lot of my clients, they actually have more discretionary money now than they did before, because if they were somebody whose job was flexible enough that they could work from home, they have very similar income. Maybe they took a 10% pay cut. They've got very similar income, and they have very few expenses because they can't go anywhere. And it's like, oh my goodness, actually, I have more than I expected. And those are the silver linings and things. And you also learn maybe what you do and don't need. Sometimes in the case of our family, one member of our family decided to fast retail shopping for a year. And it was a very cool thing because I see that the impact of that over time, that person is a little less likely to engage in retail therapy. And so that was one person's, and, so there's different ways in which I think we can even be creative. And this is the nature of who God is. I find that no two people's journeys are obviously the same. We can look at the same principle of scripture and come up with a number of different applications because God is also an infinitely personal God. So I don't expect that everyone does everything the way that I'm going to do it. What I hope to do is inspire people to think about what it means for them. And really, that's the joy of it too, because then you see who God is. He leads people to incredible creative ideas that none of us would have thought of. And it's like this wonderful creative synergy. The whole is definitely more than the sum of parts. It's really a multiplicative or a geometric increase of creativity from a creative God. So it's just super exciting. And those are the sort of things that I think about. But finally, I think that it does come around to an idea of knowing your values and your goals. And I think there are times to reaffirm that. And one of the things that's really important for us is that we always take time as a firm even to sit down with people in the beginning of a process and talk through values and goals. Because I find that money is an incredible tool. It's a great servant, but it's a terrible master. If you are clear on what your values and your goals are, it also helps you decide how much is enough. And that's a question for all of us is how much do I really need? And hey, I might have the income, I may not have the income that I want, whatever, but what is it that I really need? And to what has God called me? And I think that's the thing. So that's one of the things that we work through. And I think at a later date, we may talk about what that exercise looks like just as a value add for people. But I think, like I said, being intentional and knowing what your purpose is regarding stewardship, knowing what you value, what your goals are, it's just a great thing. And you can do it at any point in life. It can be New Year, it can be during the year, it can be whenever. So it's just fun.
That's a great point. And I love just that freedom and the joy and fun in the fundraising, if you want to think about, somebody who has a need and then you kind of acting and the way that you put it in the beginning of listening first and then leaning in and then learning and seeing what opportunities come and creating kind of those matches, if you will, around every corner. And I do like the idea of, not thinking about, because I think there's a lot of pressure for everyone, in the world. when January 1st strikes of I should, must do these things at these points in time. And even for me, I went for a walk, and this was not on January 1st, but just my word of the year eventually came to me, and I didn't have it on the 1st or the 2nd or the 3rd, but then it came, and my word for the year is light. And I like that word because it's a noun, but it's also a verb, and it's also an adjective. So it's fun to think about, me and what actions I could take to light somebody else's darkness in a moment, in a longer part of their journey, or just to receive God's light in life in new and different ways, or to talk about, making something lighter. And so I do like that idea of even, thinking about how do I want, for me personally, what is that word going to mean, and how does that unfold in my path? And so, yeah, thank you for taking us on that journey through. I'm curious to learn more about your thoughts on values and goals. And so we'll do that next time. Maybe you can just speak to, since you've been such a faithful supporter of GoCore's work and kind of having some creative, innovative ways of giving, maybe you could speak to just some of kind of where you started on that part of the journey and kind of where you're at now, or just how God shined a light on some of those opportunities as it relates to one particular charity.
So I remember first hearing about the vision of GoCore. I was in New York, and Paul and I met on the Upper East Side for a breakfast at a cafe. And so we were talking a little bit there, and he talked about something that was an innovative model. And where I'm coming from, because I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area near Silicon Valley, innovation drives everything. And really, to me, the purpose of business exists to remove barriers and provide people access to critical services or products to make their lives better. That's what I understand business to be, and that's why I love it. Now, that to me is business in a pure form. Of course, people can use it in ways that are not, I think, well aligned, but that to me is it at a pure level. So when I thought about it, I was like, this is great. So what we have is we have a model that streamlines a traditionally difficult process, which is the application process, the selection process of, hey, what ministry organization do I go with? Everyone seems to have their specific focus, but I need a place where I would have maybe access to a portfolio of options so that and it's a diverse portfolio of options so that I can choose something that's really tailored that way. So, okay, we've streamlined the application process, providing better access from a product standpoint. In addition to that, providing great resourcing for bringing people up to speed in terms of the fundraising, bringing along partnership in that way. And then with loan forgiveness too, it was, hey, we're going to make it so that if people raise a certain amount, we're going to provide loan forgiveness so that the traditional barriers that would exist, which are people saying, hey, I would love to go serve for 2 years, but I'm too indebted. Effectively, it removes that excuse and it frees the person up then to be able to respond to what God is doing in a way that they might not have expected. And to me, it's like, okay, we've just eliminated all these different barriers that would potentially keep us from walking in the fullness of what God has in store. And to me, that's innovation. That's really what Silicon Valley is driven on. And with all these tech companies, to me, Paul could have very easily been a tech entrepreneur, but he's taking that sort of emphasis and he's applying that to the world of mission. And so whenever you're removing barriers, whenever you're making business or commerce or mission flow more efficiently, to me, you're participating in a work that reflects God's creative work. For me, that's the easy thing and the thing that I love about GoCore. So I get really excited about it because then I think, hey, someday my kids could also be accessing or going out potentially and serving for 2 years, which would be my heart for them. But with an organization that's got a clear track. My own personal story also is that I also got stuck in some of the red tape of some of the traditional processes, and those created some barriers and unnecessary friction that might have made it difficult for me to go away for 2 years, which was my intent. I'd come to work at this firm, our firm, for about 3 years. I was intending to go away for two. There just wasn't the sort of broad range of opportunities in a portfolio, as it were, for me to choose from. I had to choose one particular organization and really go the distance with them. And if things didn't work out as they needed to with that organization, I would have to completely restart the whole process. And I just didn't have the luxury of that sort of time. So anyway, on my, for me personally, that was a significant factor as well. So my own personal experience, the love of innovation, and yeah, to me, it makes for a perfect synergy in that regard.
That's so great. Thank you for the ways that your energy, you could just feel it. And I love the parallel. I'm newer to the Bay Area, but just that idea of the making of something, and to think about how we can all make a more generous life, and how we have voice in that, even if we are listening and leaning in to what God has for us. And just this power of scalability is the other thing that I heard you speak to. And even in your, the example of someone who wanted to just shop a little less and maybe do something else because their values were more aligned with maybe giving a few more dollars away as opposed to owning a few more articles of clothing, that's such a tangible way to see scale and the pivot closer to living out what you set forth. This is what I believe, and this is what I hold true for where your heart is and all of that. That's so great. Thank you, Joel, for the ways that you've illuminated. I just was jotting notes myself even about how I could think about setting some of my giving goals, and the beauty of just this circle of giving, and how the blessings, it is a blessing to be a blessing, and getting to, be part of that journey, not just with ourselves and our maker, but together with others. So I think that's the beauty of having a conversation like this one, and what we'll get to do again, to have that discussion and that dialogue together, and the pondering and the considerations. I think you also mentioned that there was another smart tip, new since 2021 is here, of a tax tip for folks. Did you want to speak more to that, since you have more knowledge in that arena?
Yeah, well, so one of the fun things too is that in giving, you can be very tax smart. Under the CARES Act, one of the things they did is they said couples that wouldn't traditionally be able to itemize, if they gave a gift to a charitable organization, that they would receive an above the line deduction. So it didn't require them to itemize. Well, they've extended that to tax year 2021. And so for even people who are saying, I'm not sure, I haven't really dove into this yet, but I'd like to at least dip my toe in the water. Think of it this way. You're going to also realize some tax savings, at least in the process. And it's up to, as I understand, $600 for a married couple, $300 per individual. And so the extension of that is super exciting to me, because like I said, it provides a great launching point for people. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not a tax professional here. All right. I want to energize your relationships with your existing advisors. Okay. So if you have a tax professional, this is not intended to be blanket advice. It's hey, go check this out. Go see for yourself. Because in the process, you never know what you'll discover. And, this is the thing about influence. Tamara, you spoke about, you're thinking through these things, even as we have these conversations. Both of us are in a position where we clearly have a sphere of influence, and there's a very direct impact that we're able to have. But everyone can have an impact. It might even be the question you're asking your tax person. Your tax person, by saying, hey, tell me more about this deduction. Are people using this widely? Or could I be using it in this way? Or, hey, could I be gifting appreciated securities or something like that? Suddenly what you're going to do is you're going to actually get them researching it if they're not in that mode. And you start to plant that seed. And that's where the spirit can really come alive. In this one particular case with the Wyoming Valley example, it's actually that I was introduced to this person through clients, and this person, he works with the heiress of an estate. And it's not a state of huge proportion, it's decent, but it's the sort of thing in working together. I mentioned my passion. He sought me out to talk about his charity. And then I just said, hey, I don't care whether you work with me directly or not. I just feel like we want to give this amount to you just because that's who we are and what I feel like God would have us do. He was just blown away, completely blown away. And now he wants to do more. And it's like, it's just these subtle spheres. And I don't know, I wasn't intentionally reaching out to folks in, near Scranton, Pennsylvania, but that's how God works. And if what it does is it helps him be more effective too and energizes his journey, my gosh, that's the kingdom at work. And that's what we're really after. But anyway, all that from a tax tip, as it were, just these opportunities that exist. And by the way, I bring it up with my clients all the time. If somebody comes and meets with us, I mentioned there's an opportunity for this type of deduction if you're not even itemizing. I just think it's a very easy thing to do. So like I said, let it energize your conversations with your tax professionals or your financial planner, and let them help guide you in that, because you never know what God will do.
I think that's beautiful. And just thinking about how, you can save money, give more away, possibly, just in terms of, making more from less. And that idea that everyone can make an impact, I truly believe. And the piece of like every dollar matters, and being in the work that we both get to do in our vocations, seeing every dollar multiply in different ways, maybe, from an investment strategy, or me from, what someone gives and how that, provides someone with a meal. And then that leads to a life change, as an example. And I also really appreciate where we started this little chat was just with a question, and the idea of asking God a question of what would you have me do, and with palms up for the time that I have, the resources that I have, and the skills that I've been granted, and asking that question and asking ourselves that question of what are our desires? What are the desires of our hearts, and what would we have? And then to go out and seek where are their needs and where can we be useful. So I look forward to continuing our conversations and our question asking. And again, for everyone who's listening in, we'll be letting you know when we'll have that next chat about the values and goals, and even get to do some little writing prompts or some kind of worksheet so that we could actually take action right now, and get you closer to living out the values that you hold and living a more generous life at the same time. So thanks for being here. Thank you so much, Joel. It was really fun.
Yeah, this has been a joy. And I just pray that God speaks to you all, and you're encouraged as a result of what you're seeing here. I'm a normal person, but I serve an amazing God, and he brings amazing things to light. So be blessed, and we look forward to additional inputs that we can have and value adds for your journey.